3, 2, 1.
Hello there, Blender friends, and in this one, I'm going to take you through a little bit about how I put this one together.
Marca Bavaria, the best publicity since 1877.
You'll see by the title, this is about not compositing. It's actually pseudo-compositing anyway, but I'll explain here in a minute. So when you're doing a commercial job, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have to do a bit of compositing, or you want to do a little bit of compositing because there's going to be some changes down the road, because you'll often be working with an art director. I know this because I was an art director at one point myself, and art directors get paid to do changes, and you'll have to expect some changes coming down the pipe. Often the only way you can go back and change things is if you've broken down your renders into passes, especially if you're changing things like colors and stuff like that. But chances are, in a case like this, the live action that's in the background of this commercial was already approved and it's been color graded by somebody, so you don't really want to touch it. So really you've only got to focus on your product integrating as nicely as possible with the background. How am I going to do this? Well, if I go into the top view here, you noticed in the commercial that we've got the camera moving forward, and the camera is actually moving forward. I'm not scaling up in compositing or using any kind of Z-depth map to do the rack focus, because when we get to around frame 100, the focus changes from our live action to our product. And if you don't know how, I'll show you how. I did this right within Blender, and it gives you a lot more control, and you're going to get a far more realistic result than doing it in compositing. And you'll also get a much more realistic interaction between the background and the products as well by doing it this way. Now, I'm not saying that this will work in most cases. In fact, it won't work in most cases using this technique because of what I had mentioned before. Our live action plate has likely been approved by an art director, so we are only focused really on what happens with the product. So how do I bring our video in? I'm going to use import images as planes, as some of you may have guessed. For those of you who are unfamiliar, it's just an add-on that comes with Blender. You'll find it here if you go into the preferences, and you'll see here import images as planes. So I've got that loaded in. I'm just going to go File, Import, and then go to Images as Planes, and I'm going to navigate to where our video is. Surfer Girl Shoreline, import images as planes. There we go. Move that into position here. Like so. And then I'm going to go into camera view. I'm going to go to where the camera starts. Get our image centered so there aren't any gaps. I'm going to turn that on and see what we've got. Okay, that looks cool. We can't leave that as it is. I'm going to go into shading and show you what I mean. See how dark it is right now? We want to make this so the scene lights don't affect the video at all. That's pretty important. So right now you can see how Blender has automatically set this up. If something happens, you may have to repopulate these settings to make sure that it's set to movie and that your number of frames are set, but it should come in fine, just like it has here. I'm going to kill the principal BSDF here in the middle. I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to add a emission. All we care about is the color. We're going to leave it at a strength of 1, and that gives us our unaffected video. So the lights in the scene aren't going to affect this because all we've got is the clean color data at a strength of 1. So it should just come in at the same levels as the person who graded this intended. Go back to our layout. So the next thing I want to do is set up that rack focus. I'm going to have it come in at frame 100. The reason being is that I find that it adds a little bit more interest having the focus come in before the camera stops moving, and it makes things look a little less CG. And I'm going to have the focus come to a point when the camera actually stops. So to control the rack focus, we are going to have to add an empty. So I'm just going to hit Shift A, plane axis, empty here, and I'm going to go into the top view, make sure that we're right on that plane with our video, and I want to actually just going to center that on the camera. Don't have to, I just want to. And I'm going to start that at frame 100. So whoop, there we go. Insert keyframe at location. And then when the camera stops, which is, looks like frame 144. At 144, I'm going to take that empty and I'm going to put it on our focus point for the product. Scooch over here and put it on our hero bottle. Clients like logos in focus, and the logo is here on the neck label. So that's where we're going to want to stick the focus point in this case. So right there. Okay. And add another keyframe, location. And I'm going to call that empty focus point. Focus point. Cool. So I'm in the camera here. Going to want to go to the green icon for our camera settings. Make sure depth of field is turned on. And with this picker, we're going to want to pick our focus object. So I'm just going to go like so. Grab the focus point object. Cool, and you can see that it's in there. So now our focus should animate. Now when setting up your depth of field, f-stop is kind of important because the smaller this number is, actually the bigger the aperture, so the shallower the depth of field. So the smaller this number is, the more blurry your blurry areas are going to be. The bigger this number is, the more focused your blurry areas are. 1.8 is pretty blurry, so if I go into our camera view, I'm using a 50mm lens with that 1.8 f-stop. I'm just going to show you the differences here. Now I'm in the camera view. Unfortunately, if you are just in this viewport shading here, it's not going to give you an accurate view of what's going on. You actually have to go into the rendered viewport shading here. So you see our product is blurry at frame 100, and if you go to 144, the background is blurry and the product is in focus. Now we're still going to add our HDRI, that'll come next, but I'll change this f-stop and you'll see how the background gets more in focus if I give it an f-stop of, say, f4. See, it gets a little bit sharper back there. If I go to 16, it gets sharper yet. I'll go, actually I'll do a 2.8. And again, that's with 50mm focal length. Okay, let's go into shading and add our HDRI. HDRIs are super important to get the look that you want, and because this is a sunset, I'm going to need a sunset HDRI. Ideally, you'd shoot this on location with a camera that'll do a 360, or you'll stitch together a 360. If you can't, you're going to have to actually go find an HDRI that approximates the whole thing. And of course you can kind of fiddle around with that HDRI to get the colors to match, and I'll show you how I do that. So we're going to go into the world, and you're going to see we've got nothing in here. The world is where we stick our HDRI. I have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. That is included in Blender, so again, go into your preferences and look for the Node Wrangler. It just makes life a lot easier or faster. So select the background node here. I'm going to go Control T, and that adds these very useful nodes over here. I'm going to go Open, navigate to our HDRI. I'm going to go to this pink sunrise, open that, and I'm going to rotate it 60 degrees here on our Z. I'm going to make it -60. It's what I had before, actually. Let's take a look at what we've got here now. I've got this set to a strength of 0.65. These are some of my background settings from before. This really is a pink sunrise, and it's so not going to match our background plate. So we're going to add another node in here. I'm going to just hit Shift A, and I'm going to do a Hue Saturation control right there. And I'm going to set this hue to 0.5, and this is going to be half the saturation. Don't want that much color in my background HDRI, and you can see now we're much better. And there we go. And now if the art director comes back to you and says, hey, we want to change up the color of, you know, whatever it might be, it's not a problem. So there you go, you get that nice integrated feeling because you've got real reflections coming from that background plate onto your foreground objects. And in this case specifically, it works very well because you've got glass items in the front. Of course, your transparency works perfectly. Now, your workflow in this case, you'd want to render out stills rather than entire animation when sending things off to the art director. You know, if you're going to be investing in rendering this out every time you show an art director or creative director, definitely the way to do this would be to do the puzzle mat, so you can knock out your product and then maybe some passes for some of the other things as well. So yeah, so in this case, you'd be doing stills until you get your approvals, and then you can render everything out. I'm running two old 1080 Ti's here. Well, if this was useful to any of you Blender heads out there, I would much appreciate it if you gave me a thumbs up, or maybe not if you didn't like it. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell if you don't want to miss any of these. And until next time, catch you then. Bye.